Today, I am going to explain The Long Walk, directed by Francis Lawrence, a movie adapted upon the book by Stephen King, The Long Walk, which is essentially what the title says, a long walk. And my general first impressions of it, I was genuinely surprised. Seeing the trailer, I was kind of skeptical. Walking to the theater, I was also a little bit skeptical because a movie about people walking, just saying it out loud is kind of absurd. But really, it's a interesting concept for sure. But I thought I would get bored. I thought the movie would be boring. And I thought the book would also be boring, but I was so wrong. Stephen King's work has this amazing engagement to it. And Francis Lawrence did an amazing job, I believe, in adapting Stephen King's work. Because throughout the movie, I was quite engaged in the story and in the world. But there are definitely some parts where I did not feel like really did it justice or felt like things were just so cheesy or corny. So in today's video, I am going to review The Long Walk, also explain the world and its deeper meaning without trying to spoil it for you guys so you can have a chance to watch it when it comes out. The movie begins with it's kind of similar to a book sequence sort of, where you're reading the text as if you're reading the book. Basically sets up the world with our main character, Raymond Garrity, who is going to be the central prime main character figure throughout this movie. And it is said that this character won a lottery system. And he says that he needs to be lined up on the starting line on May 1st to begin the Long Walk tournament. And that sets up the initial story that audiences are already aware of now. So Ray does just that. He gets to the starting line on May 1st, dropped off by his mom, and they say their farewell goodbyes. But obviously his mom is in emotional distress because she knows what this long walk is about. Ray also knows what this long walk is about because this long walk tournament or competition or whatever has been going on for perhaps years, maybe even decades. But the world that is set up in is that it is very gray, it is very muted, and it is very desaturated. Everything is depressing and almost just looks dystopian. The colorist or the cinematography of whoever did it really invoked that sense through the colors itself and the costume design. A lot of characters' costume designs were just plain and neutral and somewhat odd, I must say, simply due to the fact that if you're planning to do a long walk, why are people wearing jeans and basically work boots, right? And I understand that maybe this is the only stuff they had at the time, but come on, jeans, really? After getting dropped off, he meets a whole cast of characters, one contestant from each state to represent the nation, as the Long Walk kind of proclaims itself to be not a death sentence, but more of a place for the state contestants to represent their state as well as their country as a figurehead of not being lazy, not being weak, but as masculine, strong men. And throughout the movie, that it really emphasizes this idea of masculinity, of bravery, of strength through the idea of walking. Which is also kind of strange because if you really want strong men, it makes me wonder why would you want to kill off these people who are so eager and willing to enter into this tournament, right? And how does the idea of strength and masculinity tie into walking? I think that this idea of masculinity and strength only stems from the fact that, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story, I feel as if it took place post-war or during a Great Depression, where men used to go to war and after coming back, kids of the new generation don't know what war was like and what being a man was like. And I feel like this nature of masculinity has been ingrained within these old folks and these new folks trying to pass on that tradition of masculinity now in this new kind of system, which is the long walk. Just a theory that I have. The rules of the long walk is pretty simple. There can only be one winner at the end of this non-existent finish line per se, as well as you must walk 3 miles per hour. If you slow down or stop, you will get a warning, and then followed by another warning. And if you get to your third and final warning, you will be eliminated. Quite literally. Let's just say you do win the long walk. What you get is one wish, as well as wealth and glory and honor within the nation that really supports this tournament and is what keeping it alive. And remember that fact. It will be very imperative for when we discuss the ending or when we discuss the whole overall theme of this movie. Throughout the movie, there's a lot of themes and messages, but this core and central theme, as I said earlier, was masculinity or strength, about work ethic, and just avoiding being lazy or being soft. And one of the antagonists that really propagates this idea is the Major, who's played by Mark Hamill. And he does a really amazing job really playing this character of being villainous while also supporting this idea of being a man, of being strong, and how their sacrifices are needed to make people stronger and more willful and not lazy. And the long walk really emphasizes that, as well as the other people supporting it. And the people who are supporting it are not even just the people who are spectating, but it is the contestants themselves who are doing the walk. Because in a way, they have a choice to enter or leave the long walk before even getting to the starting line. They were not forced to enter into the lottery and be chosen as the state winner, right? Many people were chosen, yet it happened to be them, and it also happened to be them to not only enter into the lottery, but show up at the starting line and commit to the walk. So the movie really emphasizes this idea of having a strong work ethic while also being participants in this tournament. It also really begs the question that one of the characters, Ray, brings up is, even though people do have a choice in this long walk, do people really have a choice? Because remember, this is a depressive, dystopian world where I'm assuming that everyone is in poverty except for the higher ups. So the people who are elected or who even enter into this lottery to participate in the long walk are coming from a background where they don't have riches, they don't have status, they don't have wealth. When you're in poverty and you're given this solution, is it really a choice when you only have one solution to choose from? And that's really another core central theme of the movie that I think that the story is trying to tell is there really a choice to escape for freedom when this is the only choice? Right? Are you really making men into men when this is the only choice to really give them? Another thing I like about the movie's theme is kind of relevant to today's message about politics and how there's a banning of materials of the olden days in this movie, where it doesn't really go into it as much, which I was really disappointed in, and I'm hoping that in the book it goes more into that. But the movie emphasizes that there's a banning of literature and materials from the old days, and if you're caught with those banned materials and literature, you can be executed for that, which really, to me, emphasizes how dystopian this world is and kind of eerily similar. In a way, similar and not similar, but recently, just like the Jimmy Kimmel Show, speaking out of the government poses a great risk to your freedom of speech or even your freedom of learning, which is also, I think, a very great danger to be really foreshadowed. Some other general details of this long walk is that characters get free water refills as long as they want, and they also get a small amount of rations of food as long as they want as well to keep them fed, but they cannot sleep, they cannot poop or pee without stopping, they must keep walking. And again, it really makes you question how this really supports this idea of being a man at the same time when you're not given much of a choice to do anything to really show yourself as worthy. The strongest element of the movie are the characters. I think the characters are the backbone of this movie. in a very, very strong way. And that's like any other movie, but the characters here really keeps the movie and its pacing engaging, because in the beginning you meet a lot of the characters when they're at the starting line and really displays their personality as well as their characteristics. But there's really a small group of few that you really come to love and be really attached to. And unfortunately, the premise of these kind of movies, it really draws you out of that kind of attachment because you already know what's going to happen. You already know what's about to happen with this kind of movie and what's going to happen to the characters. And that's a really sad thing about movies like this, is that it's predictable and it can be cheesy just because the whole movie sets it up to be this battle royale, right? While also introducing these characters who you know aren't going to be at the end of the finish line. The main characters that the movie really sets you up to really love and be engaged with is Raymond Garrity as well as Peter McFreeze, who are probably the two characters that, as you would predict, will be at the end of the starting line, and who you also predict will have to guess who will make it out. And unfortunately, like I said, this is very predictable as it's really emphasized throughout the trailer and in the movie and that this is going to happen, unfortunately. I don't think it's a spoiler just because it's really obvious and straightforward just upon the pictures and the trailer materials as well as the just the screen time that they have, that they're not going to kill off these characters. What I do appreciate within the characters though is probably the very diverse cast with all of them having very different personalities, motives, and backgrounds. For a short movie where you don't really get to meet the characters so much as I would think in the book, the movie really makes you really get attached to this one character and this other character and really learn their story and their personality so well. And I think that all the cast played their characters so well, especially this one Asian character. And I thought he was so very comedic, and he was like that comedic kid. And unfortunately, I'm not gonna spoil it, but you really learn to love him until you can't anymore. And that was what was heartbreaking, because they really did a good job in acting their characters out. Another thing is that even though the actors are kind of old, the cast feels like they're actually kids. They feel genuinely oblivious, but also just scared. At the same time, these are just kids who know what they're getting into, but at the same time, don't know. Because these are just oblivious kids who think that this is the only way for them to bring honor to their family or bring in wealth for their family and for themselves in this dystopian world society that they have already set themselves up to be. Another thing is that I feel like sometimes the characters make really just dumb decisions, like one of the main characters almost kills himself off because he sees his mom, but in the most questionable character sense, I would not imagine why he would do that, because he's doing this in front of his mom, knowing that he might even get killed or will be killed, and doing that in front of your mom is just crazy to do, because that will go against his character, as he was always thinking about his mom and not wanting to die because of his mom and bring honor to her. So I just thought that was questionable. So what about the pacing and the structure? Throughout the first act and the second act, I thought the pacing was pretty good. It kept us engaged throughout the movie, and with every death, the pacing sped up and got more intense and intense. And I think that with each and every death, the pacing really kept the treadmill going, because if no one died and people just kept on walking and things didn't happen, the pacing would have been really slow, right? And that's an unfortunate consequence, because there was a moment where you started off with 50 people and then you went down to 49 and 48, and out of nowhere there's only 20 people left, which is crazy to see because that happened within just the first half of the movie. So meeting all those characters were kind of irrelevant. They're just kind of background characters essentially. And then until then, afterwards, you kind of get shortened down to from 20 to 10, and then from 10 to maybe 5, and then from 5 to maybe now down to 2. And it really drops off really quickly, one by one. Not every character gets their own death of screen time, but the prominent characters get their own death scene which are probably only, I would say, 8 characters, I think, 8 or 10 characters out of 50. However, I must say the brutality and the gore of each of that, and it sounds insane for me to say it, but I thought that the brutality and gore were just so amazing. The visual effects they did, or the makeup, whatever, I thought it was really gory and brutal, but not in a horror sense. I just thought it was very gory and brutal and kept the audiences really engaged, like, holy shit. Even though I liked the first act and probably the second act of the movie, I think that the third act was when things really kind of died down and died off in terms of really keeping me engaged. I'm not saying that it was a bad ending, but I felt like you already knew what was going to happen. You already know what was going to be and how it was going to end, and that kept the pacing kind of not in a bad flow, but it felt like the audiences were ahead of the pacing. As I noted earlier, the one thing I really liked though was the performance between the characters, especially Ray and Peter. The two main characters, they had like this very big bromance and bro love, and it really seemed that the characters play on this joke that, they're gay for each other, which I don't think is the case. I just think that they really just loved each other because two people who didn't know who each other were met at the starting line and just came to form this friendship throughout 4 days. And at one point, you really learn to really root for them. So going back to the themes of the movie, I did mention earlier that within the themes of the movie, there are some things that are very questionable within the characters, as well as how the theme itself doesn't quite make sense. And I'm really wanting to emphasize that on a little bit, emphasize on that a little bit more now knowing the characters. Ray has this very strong motive to get to the starting line because he wants to end the system. Ray's motive to end the system is through the method of assassinating the Major, who is the antagonist of the movie that is set up throughout. However, I theorize that the movie's antagonist is not the Major himself, but really the people who are supporting this kind of system, who is living in the system, who is supporting this long walk, who's rooting and cheering on these contestants because it's reinforcing that behavior. Even if you kill the Major, right? Who's to say that not another Major is going to step in? I think that Ray's motive is in a good heart. However, he is still that oblivious child who doesn't think of the greater sense of the world that he's in, unfortunately, because he plays that kid really well, of course, but digging deeper into his motive of joining this long walk in the first place doesn't quite make sense. Because I really think that if Ray won the long walk, it is not really a victory because he is still in the system even throughout. There's a lot of broader impacts to really look at throughout this movie. However, I really think that the theme of the movie about masculinity, about being strong, and about being a man, as the Major tries to emphasize, really is not supported within the Major himself, which Ray thinks is. But I feel like it's the system of people that are cheering these contestants on, and perhaps even the contestants themselves who are participating in it, really trying to display it. That is my review of The Long Walk. I'm gonna give it a solid 6.8 out of 10. I thought that the movie's pacing and characters were phenomenal and really engaging for the movie that it is. The ending didn't really have much to desire for or really expect or want because it was kind of something that you already expect, unfortunately. But at the same time, you kind of were rooting for them anyways. In a way, maybe someone could say symbolically by rooting for these contestants, you are also rooting for the system in a way as well, maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of interpretations and meanings that I felt like could have been explored a little bit more, but that's just my personal belief that sometimes these things could be expanded on within the lore of the movie, but just didn't have enough time because it was more focused on the drama narrative of the two characters. That was A Long Walk. I hope you enjoyed my explanation of the movie without trying to spoil it as much as I could, as well as my review of it. I hope you liked this video. please do subscribe and like and comment what you think. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, bye. Have a good day.